right, I'm here with my man Virus, a fellow Tomcat Rio. Virus was in Checkmates. He's got his Checkmate t-shirt on.
BF211.
Virus has both a YouTube channel, which is Tomcat Cockpit POV. In fact, I've used some of his footage, particularly in the in-flight refueling episode. I used some of the footage that he took tanking off an S3. And he also has an Instagram page. We had lunch a few weeks ago, and we were talking about a bunch of things. And we started talking about our favorite military movies. So we thought we'd get together and offer our 10 best military movies. So each of us is going to kind of throw in 5. So up front, we wanted to address what Virus calls the gorilla in the room, which is neither Top Gun nor Final Countdown are on this list, which doesn't mean we don't love those two movies. I mean, I've made a cottage industry on this channel about talking about Top Gun and Final Countdown. So we do love both of those movies. They influenced both of us in different ways. However, for this list, the standard is things that actually represent war in a whole different bunch of ways, and we'll talk about those as we go along. What's your first one, Virus?
I think I'm going to go with Platoon, 1986. Oliver Stone, Charlie Sheen, Tom Berenger, Willem Dafoe, and a bunch of others that probably were not big names at the time. At the very beginning, there's a C-130 landing, dropping off all the FNGs. They're getting out of the back of the plane, walking by in a line as all the crusty vets are getting on the plane and they've done their time and they're looking at each other. And the very last guy looks Charlie Sheen in the eye as he's walking, and they stare each other down for a couple minutes, and the guy's just got empty eyes, just kind of 1,000-yard stare, clearly shell-shocked. And then there's Charlie Sheen going into the jungle, not knowing what any of this means, not knowing what this guy's staring back at him, what that means, what he's about to get into.
So it's got some of the Vietnam era, I don't want to be pejorative and say cliches, drug use in the bunker, abuse of the villagers, and then finally fragging your own guys, kind of a thing, right? So critics would say those are all cliches of the Vietnam War. But, you know, Oliver Stone walked the walk, and I think he went at this with enough sincerity that he was able to pull it off.
Remember, they had to call close air support in on their own position.
Yeah. So that's actually Dale Dye, who has been an advisor to Hollywood for years and years, a real Marine, friend of mine, fantastic guy. And he's the guy that says, drop everything you got on pause. And then he says something like, what a hell of a way to run a war. Right. So my first one is Dr. Strangelove. So I was sort of wondering whether I should put satire on the list. Even within satire, Dr. Strangelove captures particularly the Cold War and this threat of nuclear holocaust in a way that satire probably works better than if you had tried to do it as a straight reading of that tension. Every line in Dr. Strangelove is a classic. You know, and as fighter guys on aircraft carriers, we watch the same movie over and over again. So on my second cruise on Kennedy, we watched Dr. Strangelove, I couldn't even tell you how many times, but we had the thing memorized by the time we were done with that deployment. Peter Sellers plays 3 characters. He plays the President of the United States, he plays Dr. Strangelove, and he plays a British RAF exchange officer. And he does all of these amazingly. There's other actors that are brilliant. Sterling Hayden as the general who goes crazy and orders this attack on the Soviet Union using B-52s and nuclear weapons. Slim Pickens does that famous scene where he's trying to get the bomb to come off and he winds up writing the bomb down, which most people think is the last scene in the movie, but it is not. The movie goes on for a little bit after that. And George C. Scott as General Buck Turgison. He's fantastic in that role. Also Stanley Kubrick, right? 2001: A Space Odyssey, Full Metal Jacket. You know, he's passed on now, but legendary movies that he has done, including some legendary war movies and some sci-fi. So this is his signature satire. Now, the other thing that's kind of interesting is it was supposed to end with a pie fight. That was the original ending. The scene was a pie fight in the war room. And he realized that it was unnecessary because it took the satire and put it into the sort of category of camp, and he didn't want to do that. The other thing that happened when it was originally going to come out is it had actually had its first screen test the day President Kennedy was assassinated.
Really?
And so because of that situation, they slid the release a couple of months into early 1964. This is one of my favorite movies, never mind war movies, but again, as satire, it does accurately portray some of the bureaucracy, some of the farcical logic, not to mention what was at stake during the Cold War. So that's why it's on the list for me.
That's a good choice. So the next one on my list is The Hurt Locker from 2008.
Okay.
Catherine Bigelow.
Whose best movie
Whose best
was
Point Break.
Point Break. Come on.
Point Break. All right.
Maybe the greatest movie ever made.
One major theme that you take away from this movie is that the things he sees just in the ordinary course of doing his job, in Iraq in this case, he takes back home with him, and it just destroys him. It destroys. It's not a movie where the character survives and gets stronger and comes out this amazing superhero. He comes back wrecked and utterly destroyed.
It was that scene in the grocery store where he kind of snaps.
Yeah, right.
That his PTS sort of lands on him there.
It does. And there's the scene where he's disarming a suicide bomber who has changed his mind and is just seems like he's just a very ordinary Iraqi citizen, and he has the explosives padlocked to him, and Jeremy Renner's character can't get the locks done on time. He's right up there, very personal, right in the guy's face, saying, "Look, I'm sorry, I'm going to do my best here, but there's a timer going." And it's not your action film, it's not your superhero film where he gets it with 1 second left and saves the day.
Yeah,
he can't
it's
do
not
it.
Mission Impossible.
No, he has to run away as the guy explodes.
Or
and
a Bond
dead.
movie.
You're right.
Yeah,
and he apologizes to him and has to run away. He says, "I'm sorry, I can't do this."
Yeah. The other scene that comes to my mind is the one where he's pulling on the lanyard, and just under the dust are like 6 all tied together. Yeah. And you just see that from above, and he's in the middle of it. That's just brilliant cinematography. Yes. Again, classic Catherine Bigelow.
Right.
So that won the Oscar. Also noteworthy within that fact is it's the lowest grossing movie ever to win an Oscar. So Oscar win doesn't always mean popular box office success. So my next one is one I saw when I was a mid at the Academy. Also, Virus is an Academy grad as well, a few years behind me. But this is back when there was a movie theater on Main Street downtown. It's not there anymore. And it's Apocalypse Now. So Apocalypse Now came out in 1979, Francis Ford Coppola's masterwork in terms of war. Maybe people would say the Godfather series is actually his best stuff. But for me, this is one of the best war movies ever. I remember reading about the production of this movie probably a year before it came out in Playboy, which I used to read as a mid for the articles. You know, that's because we're intellectually rigorous there during our undergraduate life. And it mentioned just how crazy this shoot was in the jungles of the Philippines. Martin Sheen had a heart attack. They were way over budget, and it wasn't anywhere close to getting done. And you know, Francis Ford Coppola had this vision that he was having trouble getting realized. So with that sort of backdrop, I walked into the theater without knowing really what I was going to be seeing. You know, and so the opening of this movie, which I just teed up in the Jim Morrison episode that I just did, is amazing. So in the theater with great sound, the jungle and helos are flying by, and then the jungle just turns into a wall of fire, and The End by The Doors comes on. And at that point I was transfixed. And the characters, Martin Sheen playing Captain Willard, and Marlon Brando playing Colonel Kurtz. Oh, by the way, this is another inside baseball thing from that day where they made a big deal out of the fact that he was being paid $1 million a day on set to act. And you know, in the late 70s, that was a lot of money. It's still a lot of money.
I'll do it.
But that was what Marlon Brando was commanding to play that role of Colonel Kurtz. Willard gets on this Navy riverine boat and goes up the river to find Colonel Kurtz to kill him. And he's given that mission in a cameo by a young Harrison Ford. And they run into Dennis Hopper, who's an American photojournalist. The best Dennis Hopper role ever, in my opinion. And so this is kind of a fever dream. It's not really a linear war movie in some ways, particularly when they get, into the part where they're among the montagnards and in the ecosystem that Colonel Kurtz has created. Oh, also, how can I forget Robert Duvall with his, I love the smell of napalm and all of that sort of stuff. So there's a lot of cool one-liners in this movie and signature scenes. The Ride of the Valkyries, that helo assault. Just amazing signature war footage.
I think when Martin Sheen punches the mirror and cuts his hand open, that was real.
That was real.
That was real
Yeah,
blood.
that was just sort of he
kept
method
rolling
acting. They kept rolling. I have the director's cut of this. I will tell you, I don't like it as much.
Why not?
Because there's too much of some of the scenes that are tighter in the first cut.
Okay.
Right? Like, they actually steal the surfboard when after they do the Charlie Don't Surf thing, and that's not cool. You're like, no, they wouldn't steal that surfboard. So I do not recommend the director's cut. I think the regular cut is really tight. And oh, by the way, Jim Morrison and Francis Ford Coppola went to UCLA Film School together, so they knew each other, and that's kind of a cool backstory as well.
My next one is Glory, 1989. Okay. Glory, Denzel Washington, Matthew Broderick. When you think of the Civil War, something that most people probably didn't think about up until that movie came out, a real awareness of how the African Americans at the time became involved in the effort for the Union troops. It shows all the trials they had to go through just to earn the right to die for their country.
Well, I love the scene where they get their uniforms
for
the first time, because again, they think they know what they want and why they want it. So they get their uniforms. Matthew Broderick, as the captain, has to fight for them to get shoes. I love that scene where he goes into the supply officer and kind of hassles him about his attitude.
Right.
Really great leadership,
yes,
right?
Yes.
Signature leadership.
Yeah.
But then they have their first engagement, and they realize that this is grisly. When a bullet hits you, it rips you apart.
Yeah. And
the guy to the left and the right of you go down, and there's bayonets. But they fight with absolute rage.
Yes. Yes.
And they do prove themselves worthy of the uniform.
You go into this willingly, voluntarily, knowing you're going to die. And these African American soldiers did that, even though so much was stacked against them, so many people didn't care about them, yet they went into this to sacrifice everything for their country. It's pretty amazing, and I think the film captured it very well.
It avoids cliches. It avoids being too sweet in terms of the atmospherics. The scene where Denzel he's going to get punished for going AWOL, and the character played by Morgan Freeman advises him not to do it, and Matthew Broderick says, no, we're going to administer punishment. And they pull his shirt down, and he's covered with scars from being whipped.
Right.
And this, you just see the look on Matthew Broderick, who's from the North and has not seen slavery up close and personal like this. And so they administer the punishment, and Denzel just takes it, a tear kind of, but it's just an intense scene.
Yeah.
And then afterwards, the Matthew Broderick character goes to the Morgan Freeman character. He's like, if you could help me from time to time, basically keep me out of trouble with respect to these kinds of things.
Yeah.
The battle scenes are intense, and you really are feeling it and you're living it with them. And so this really does take you on the journey of these African American soldiers in a way that is very unique. So Glory very much deserves to be on our list here. So my next one is 1917. It's a newer movie, came out in 2019. It's about World War I, which is kind of a war that lives in the shadow in terms of Hollywood's coverage of it.
War,
Yeah, I mean, you've got All Quiet on the Western Front, but 1917, I saw it in the theater, which is the way to see it. And back when we used to go to the theater, right, pre-COVID. And I had no idea what this was about. I mean, I knew it was about World War I, but I had no idea what I was about to, this journey I was about to go on, this experience I was going to have. The director is Sam Mendes, who also did Jarhead with Jake Gyllenhaal, my good friend Anthony Swafford's debut novel. So that Mendes did that movie. But the thing that is incredible is basically the movie is done in 2 shots.
Really?
Yes. And when you see this, it is a miracle of cinema. So these two soldiers are told that they need to go deliver a message to stop another company from attacking, because the Germans have given them the idea that they retreated, but they have just really redoubled their force. So they're walking into a disaster. One of these two soldiers' brother is an officer in that company, and so he's very motivated to go do it. The camera follows them from the trenches of their side through the abandoned German fortifications on across the plains of France into this other situation. And it is just amazing. I mean, it's punishing, it's visceral. It really does take you on a trip where if you want to know what war is like, that's it. It includes also, they're watching this dogfight, and the German guy gets shot down, and they realize that this flaming wreck is coming towards them. These two guys on the ground, they run away, and it hits this farmhouse. And the scene to me that is the most amazing, maybe the most amazing scene in war movies, is the one where they're going over the top and the advance has started, and the Tom Blake character, who's played by Dean Charles Chapman, is running to find the guy in charge so he can call off the advance. So he's running perpendicular to the guys advancing as shells are going off. He ultimately does find the officer he needs to find and give him the word that they need to stop the advance, played by Benedict Cumberbatch, who has a real nice cameo there. This is really one of the best war movies of all times.
Well, the next one is Saving Private Ryan.
Fantastic choice.
Spielberg.
It's got to be on the list.
Yeah, as the door drops on the landing craft and nearly the whole craft
They're just
is
savage.
wiped out.
They're just savage.
Just
yeah.
gone.
Right.
Just gone in those moments. And it goes on and on. I'm thinking of the hand-to-hand combat scene when they're in the village.
Right.
The American and the German soldier, and the final act is
plunging,
just slowly stab them when they're just inches apart. Their faces, they're looking at each other in the eye.
Well, it's unrelenting.
So
to your point, the opening landing is obviously very intense, very punishing. I mean, can you imagine being on that first wave? How do you jump in the landing craft? And we know the answer is because you don't want to let your buddy down. Right? The same reason we went, nighttime ops or whatever. You're just afraid of letting each other down. So my next movie is Patton. Came out in 1970, starring George C. Scott as Patton. I like movies that follow a single character. Now, as we know, and as is portrayed in the movie, he was used as a misdirection play to make the Germans think the invasion was not going to D-Day. So he really loved being a general. And he also gave sort of a reverence to the wounded. So he's visiting a hospital, and this one guy's got war nerves. And so he's kind of pissed off that this guy is just scared. He doesn't have any physical wounds. And he famously or infamously slaps him. And it makes headline news, and he has to apologize to him. Also, the movie starts with this famous speech that he gives. No damn bastard ever won a war by dying for his country. He won wars by making the other damn bastard die for his country. So that scene and that speech is classic American cinema.
And it's shown up, I don't know if you recall this, but I know it's shown up in at least a few Fighter Fling videos during my time. I don't know if you've had it. I'm sure it's made the rounds through those.
Well, I mean, people always riff on that in different, all officers' meetings or whatever. You'll start your remarks with that. In terms of how the movie did, it was nominated for 10 Academy Awards. It won 7, including it won Best Picture. And George C. Scott, and this is in the 1971 Academy Awards, he won Best Actor, but he did not accept the award because he didn't believe in awards for being an actor. So he was the first actor to ever refuse to get the Oscar. So there you go.
And George C. Scott showing up on your list again.
He shows up on my list again, right? This is my second George C. Scott, next to Dr. Strangelove. But I love him in this movie. And this is, again, as a portrayal of flawed individuals who rise to the highest ranks, but ultimately are fantastic leaders. This is a great movie, and that's why it made the list for me. So Your last one is?
Zero Dark 30.
Okay, that's a good one.
Now we're back to Catherine Bigelow.
Back to Catherine Bigelow.
Like I said, she's my favorite. One problem I have with a lot of war movies, I may have mentioned this earlier, that a lot of the cliches are that they show the characters having perfect information, perfect intelligence all the time. Everything works right, everything goes right. I think in here, this is probably the best portrayal of how that's not the case at all. In The Fog of War, this is a continuous intelligence collection with lots of collaboration and very imperfect information by lots of different agencies and sources feeding in, trying to put the pieces together. And if you recall, the movie's broken up into segments with one-word titles, and I think Tradecraft is the title of one of the segments, where it just kind of explains how intelligence gathering is, there's some high tech, but a lot of it is just people on the ground asking simple questions and putting all these different pieces together and figuring out the puzzle in a very non-high-tech way, a very low-tech way. The film doesn't make a whole lot of... It lets you make judgments. It shows in the beginning that we're torturing detainees to get information. It doesn't necessarily take a view on that. You decide whether that's worth it or not. It's up to the viewer, but it certainly shows it in explicit detail and lets you make that decision. And then there's James Gandolfini, who's in there as well. People may not remember that as the CIA director.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Yeah. The late, great James Gandolfini. Yeah. The last one on our list is arguably my favorite of them, which is Das Boot. If you watch it, you've got to watch it in German with subtitles. It makes a big difference in terms of the impact. So Das Boot is about a U-boat crew, and they have an embedded journalist with them for this patrol. It's directed by Wolfgang Petersen. Jürgen Prochnow stars as the captain of the ship. A brilliant portrayal of leadership. Mm-hmm. You know, these guys are the sea wolves, very experienced. This movie does a fantastic job to show the bravery and the skill. What is ironic about the movie, I remember this realization the first time I saw it, is you're rooting for the Germans. You're like, you nasty Royal Navy guys, leave them alone, as they're trying to transit the Straits of Gibraltar.
Right.
You know, and so it's also brings up some of the subtleties about the captain is not pro-Nazi. In fact, at this phase of the war, he's very much anti-Nazi, but he's going to do his duty. The cinematography, including how they go through the ship from stern to stem in their alarm when they go to GQ, and they need to make the ship dive fast, the boat dive fast, so everybody has to go forward. And living conditions are horrific. And it's just, you are feeling the sweat, you're smelling the body odor, you're scared, and you're also elated when you have a victory. And so this movie's got all of that. And also, it's a very European movie, and I won't spoil it for those of you who haven't seen it, but it doesn't end on a happy note. Okay, so just leave it at that. So there you go. Virus, right. Thank you for coming by.
Thank you very much, Mooch.
Those are our 10 best. And if you guys have other choices different than ours, and I'm sure you do, please put them in the comments. All right, that'll do it for this episode. If you're a first-time viewer, please ring the bell and become a subscriber. Give me the likes and comment. If you'd like to help support the channel, please consider using the super thanks or become a patron at patreon.com/WardCarroll. Check the links below for merch and where to get the Punks trilogy, my first 3 novels about an F-14 squadron ashore and at sea. Use the discount code PUNKYT to get 25% off when you order at usni.org. The Naval Institute Press is my publisher. And in the meantime, I look forward to talking to you again soon.